Good afternoon. My name is Byron McLean, and I am the chairman of the Student Advisory Committee at the Institute of Politics. The Institute was founded in 1966 in memory of President John F. Kennedy, Jr., as a living memorial to his career as a public servant. The mission of the organization is twofold. One, to bring together the academic and political worlds, and two, to encourage undergraduates to pursue careers in public policy, public service, and politics. There is no better example of advancing President Kennedy's vision of American engagement in the world than bringing in eminent leaders to this forum. Today, we are honored to have the President of the Dominican Republic, Dr. Leonel Fernandez, as our speaker. Dr. Fernandez has truly evidenced his commitment to public service throughout his life as a courageous activist and reformist. Here to formally introduce President Fernandez is Dr. Alan Counter, a professor of neurobiology and the director of the Harvard Foundation of Intercultural Relations. Dr. Counter.
Thank you. Su Excelencia Presidente Leonel Fernández Reina, saludos y bienvenido a la Universidad de Harvard como nuestro invitado honrado. También nos gustaría darles la bienvenida a sus ministros distinguidos y colegas de la República Dominicana. Your Excellency, President Leonel Fernandez Reina, Dr. Joseph Nye, Dean of the Kennedy School of Government, Mr. Bill White, Director of the ARCO Forum, faculty, students, and friends. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We are honored today to have as our guest one of the most distinguished young politicians in the Western Hemisphere. Dr. Leonel Fernandez Reina was elected President of the Dominican Republic in 1996. His rise to the presidency follows an unusual path. He was born in the Dominican Republic, but was raised and began his schooling in New York City. He returned to Santo Domingo, one of the oldest Spanish cities in the Western Hemisphere, to receive his college and law school education. As such, he is a living symbol of the close ties that bind our country to the nations of the Caribbean. He participated actively in student movements of the 70s. After graduating from law school with honors, he immersed himself in Dominican political life with a passion. The author of many books and lectures, Mr. Fernandez Reina has played an important role in the political and intellectual life of his country since his student years. Among the achievements on his very lengthy academic curriculum vitae, he has served as professor of sociology and has studied journalism at Columbia University. He is currently a faculty member for postgraduate students at the State University's Latin American Faculty of Social Science. During the first 3 years as president, he has become well known for his dedication to improving the economic and social opportunity for all sectors of society in the Dominican Republic. He has reoriented public investment funding towards social expenditures, mainly favoring education and public health. He has encouraged greater cooperation with other Latin American countries, especially with neighboring Haiti. On behalf of the faculty and students of the Harvard Foundation and the Weatherhead Center, directed by Professor Jorge Dominguez, and President Neil Rudenstein, it is our great privilege to introduce to you the recipient of the 1999 Harvard Foundation Award for outstanding contributions to leadership in government and intercultural relations. His Excellency, President Leonel Fernandez Reina.
Good afternoon. Thank you. Well, it is a great honor and privilege to be here today at this forum of the JFK School of Government of Harvard University sharing with you some of our views and thoughts about the future of the Dominican Republic. I am aware that there is an increased interest in the United States about the Dominican Republic. And it is quite curious that that interest has nothing to do with traditional problems in Latin America, such as military uprisings, guerrilla warfare, drug trafficking, or social upheavals. Instead, it has to do with baseball. I know that right here in your Boston area, there is a young man who wears a Red Sox uniform with the number 45 on his back that just might become this year's American League Cy Young Award winner. His name is Pedro Martinez. And he is from the Dominican Republic. But so are also Sammy Sosa, Manny Ramirez, Alex Rodriguez, just to name a few. In fact, the Dominican Republic has become the most important exporter of Major League Baseball players to the United States. There are about 70 of them playing in the different teams this year, and many, many more in the minor leagues waiting for an opportunity to be called to this now globalized sport of baseball. Since baseball and the Dominican Republic are so closely linked, I asked our first member of the Hall of Fame, and now the Minister of Sports of the Dominican Republic, to accompany us in this trip. He's not here. I'm talking about Juan Marichal, by the telling me he's not here. Well, I'm sorry about that. Many of you might remember him. He was called the high-kicking star of the San Francisco Giants. As I am sure all of you know, the Dominican Republic occupies the eastern two-thirds of the island of Hispaniola, of which Haiti makes up the western end. It has a population of nearly 8 million people in a territory nearly 48,000 square miles. Nearly 1 million Dominicans live abroad, especially in the United States, where they have become a respectable, hardworking community. During the 15th century, the first contact of Spanish settlers with the civilization of the New World took place in what is now the Dominican Republic. And the Cathedral of Santo Domingo and the University of Santo Domingo are the oldest in the Western Hemisphere. The history of the Dominican Republic has been troublesome and complicated. It has been a history of permanent struggles to establish democracy, freedom, and economic prosperity. In the 19th century, foreign occupation, regional and national uprisings, and dictatorships took place. In the 20th century, we had 2 U.S. military occupations, one from 1916 to 1924, and the other in 1965. The first U.S. occupation was followed by the 31-year dictatorship of Rafael Leonidas Trujillo. That was from 1930 to 1961. Modern history in the Dominican Republic began with the assassination of Trujillo in May 1961. After Trujillo's disappearance, the Dominican Republic became some sort of a test case for the new Alliance for Progress policy that President Kennedy was promoting in Latin America as a response to the Cuban Revolution. And I must say that President Kennedy was the most involved U.S. president in Latin American affairs after Franklin Delano Roosevelt in the 1930s and 40s. And according to Arthur Schlesinger, in his book, I'm quoting, 1,000 Days in the White House, President Kennedy analyzed the post-Trujillo political situation in the Dominican Republic was going to be the first U.S. ambassador to the Dominican Republic after Trujillo's death, John Baldo Martin. And President Kennedy analyzed with him the situation created in the Dominican Republic with the disappearance of Trujillo. and concluded elaborating. Here is Juan Marichal. That's him. He also pitched for the Red Sox. And President Kennedy concluded this way, in such a way that he elaborated the first U.S. policy guide towards the Dominican Republic after post-Trujillo. He said, "In a descending order of preferences, the United States would prefer for the Dominican Republic a democratic regime, a continuation of a Trujillo regime, or a Castro regime. We would aim for the first, but not renounce the second until we are sure the third could be avoided." Nowadays, democracy prevails in the Dominican Republic, but it has not been an easy task. A year after Trujillo's assassination in 1962, elections took place, and they were overwhelmingly won by Juan Bosch, the exile leader and noted short story writer. 7 months after his inauguration, however, he was overthrown by a coup d'etat, and as a consequence, democracy in the Dominican Republic suffered a major setback. In 1965, there was a civil-military uprising with the purpose of returning Juan Bosch to power. But overreacting to what was feared as a possible communist threat, the Johnson administration sent U.S. troops to the Dominican Republic, and the rebellion came to an end. And it is interesting to establish some sort of parallel between what happened in the Dominican Republic in 1965 with this civil-military uprising, whose purpose was to return Juan Bosch to power, and the Johnson administration ordered a U.S. military occupation to prevent Bosch returning to power, and what happened in Haiti in 1991, when the U.S. government then contributed to returning President Aristide to power in Haiti. And we believe the main reason for this different pattern of behavior in U.S. foreign policy had much to do with the Cold War. In the 60s, the threat of communism was a major idea of preventing the returning of Juan Bosch to power. Much alike, the same circumstances, but different periods in modern history. In 1966, Joaquin Balaguer, the other towering figure of modern Dominican politics, along with Juan Bosch, was elected president, and through successive electoral processes remained in power until 1978, during 12 years, heading the country in a period of enormous political tensions, but sustainable economic growth. From 1978 to 1986, the oppositionist Dominican Revolutionary Party governed the country through the administrations of Antonio Guzman and Salvador Jorge Blanco. Guzman's administration contributed to the advancements of freedom and democracy in the country. But due basically to economic mismanagement, Balaguer returned to power in 1986 and remained until 1996, when I became elected president under the ticket of the Partido de la Liberación Dominicana, a party that was founded by Juan Bosch in 1973 as a result of a split within the Dominican Revolutionary Party, which then was led by another important political figure of the post-Trujillo era, José Francisco Peña Gómez. Since 1961, in summary, the Dominican Republic has been going through a transitional period towards a democratic regime. But during all this period, democracy has been fragile, non-institutionalized, corrupted, and clientelistic. Since 1966, we have had 8 consecutive presidential elections, and while some of them have been tainted with fraud and irregularities, the 1996 elections were not contested, as were neither the 1998 congressional and municipal elections. Since Trujillo's death, the country has been transformed economically, socially, and culturally. The Dominican Republic is no longer a peasant's society. It is an urban, internationally connected country. Over the 1960s and 1970s, it was largely dependent upon sugar for foreign exchange. But since the 80s, it has made a shift into export assembly manufacturing, tourism, and telecommunications. When I came to office, the main goals to be achieved by the new administration were to guarantee macroeconomic stability and economic growth without inflation, to promote national and foreign investment, to reform the state-owned companies that have traditionally presented huge deficits, like the Dominican Electrical Company, the Dominican Corporation of State Enterprises, a holding of several industrial companies, the Sugar State Council, state-owned hotels, and the country's airports and harbors, to create jobs, to support small businesses, and give a new direction to public expenditure in favor of education, health, water supply, sewage, and housing. My administration was also committed to strengthen and modernize state institutions, to combat corruption, to encourage and support a reform in the judicial system, to guarantee the non-interference of the executive branch in the area of competence of the other branches of power, and to play a more active and visible role in international affairs. In summary, my administration was committed to modernizing the Dominican economy and society, to strengthening democratic institutions, and to prepare the country for the 21st century. During my 3 years in government, the Dominican economy has registered an average growth of 7.5%, one of the most vigorous in the world. Last year, GDP increased by 7.3%, the highest in all Latin America, despite damages caused by Hurricane Georges. For 1999, for this year, the World Economic Outlook, a publication of the IMF, states that the Dominican economy could reach a growth of 7.3%, making it the highest in the world, and in a moment when the whole of Latin America will experience zero growth for this 1999. Some countries will even be negative, like Venezuela, Colombia, Ecuador, will have negative GDP growth for this 1999. In the Dominican Republic, unemployment rate has decreased from 19.6% in 1991 to 14.3% in 1998. During the 3 years of my administration, 400,000 new jobs have been created, and 120,000 new ones are being projected for next year, which will make the indicator drop to approximately 13%, the unemployment rate. During the 1996-1999, inflation has been maintained at around 7%, and during the first semester of this year, 1999, inflation has been minus 2%. As a consequence of this economic growth, there are inescapable signs of change in the Dominican Republic. New apartment buildings, office complexes, shopping malls, fast food restaurants appear everywhere. Fast food American restaurants, Burger King, Wendy's, etc. Over 2.5 million tourists visit the country each year, making the Dominican Republic the most attractive tourist destination in the Caribbean, with 43,000 hotel rooms. Public construction projects, which include highways, bridges, roads, housing, schools, hospitals, churches, can be seen throughout the whole country. A qualified witness, an expert on Dominican affairs, Professor Howard Riarda, in a recent report for the Center for Strategic and International Studies, observed the following, I quote, "The economic quickening affects the entire country. More money is circulating, and jobs are being created on an unprecedented level, and no longer just cutting cane. there's more dynamism, energy, and movimiento in the Dominican economy and society than ever before in the nation's history. In my 30 years of visiting, traveling, and studying in the country, I have never seen the Dominican Republic look so good or feel so optimistic," unquote. We have improved our school systems by repairing the infrastructure, building nearly 500 new schools, distributing freely 1 million school breakfasts on a daily basis, increasing teacher salaries, and installing computer labs in all public high schools. It was important to enable Dominican children and youth to have the basic education, but also to ensure quality education through access to the most modern technology and new learning methods. The same can be said of the public health system, where huge investments have been made to repair ruined hospitals and construct and equip new ones. The public transportation system has been transformed. New buses circulate in the main cities, and there is a new, more respected police traffic. We have been successful in controlling government corruption up to the point that there has not been a single scandal during the last 3 years, but as we know, this is an endless endeavor that should be faced with the creation of new institutions to control officials' wrongdoings. Nevertheless, deep social problems remain in the Dominican Republic. In spite of the sustained economic growth experienced during the 1990s, this has not yet benefited in equal terms all social sectors. The reason why there still remains a large segment of the population which lives in poverty. We are still dealing with housing problems, lack of water supply, electricity, unpaved roads, and low sanitary conditions. But as you know, it is not possible for a nation by itself to be successful in alleviating poverty. In addition to having a sustained economic growth during a determined period of time and having also democratic stability, there are other conditions that must be taken into consideration with the participation of the international community, such as the debt burden, trade imbalances, technological transfer, foreign aid, and foreign investment. Moving into the 21st century, the Dominican Republic, as the rest of other nations of the world, faces the challenges of globalization, which means at the same time opportunities and risks. For maximizing the opportunities, the Dominican Republic, while defining an international strategy of competitiveness, has 3 main internal tasks to accomplish as we enter the new millennium. First, we must achieve democratic consolidation. Second, we must continue to sustain economic growth. And third, we must implement social reform. Our country has already made certain progress in some of these areas. We do not only hold free and fair elections every 4 years and have a free press and free assembly, but we have been making noticeable efforts to develop strong and effective state institutions, representative political parties, and active civil society. Over a year ago, for example, we put in practice a new way of democratic participation through our national dialogue experience. For the first time in our national history, civil society institutions were invited to be part of the decision-making process of implementing a national agenda on development, which means that for the first time, government policies were designed from bottom to top, making it a real participatory democracy. The Dominican Republic has become more active in international affairs. It has signed a free trade agreement with the Central American countries pending approval in Congress, and advanced negotiations with the Caribbean nations, members of CARICOM. We have been host to several summits of heads of states and government, and in November of this year, we will hold the summit of the African, Caribbean, and Pacific nations, the ACP countries, which will gather nearly 70 heads of states and government, which will be held in Santo Domingo, our national capital. As you can see, the Dominican Republic has come a long way to reduce poverty, to create growth, to improve the well-being of its people. We now only look forward that Pedro Martinez wins this year's the American League Cy Young Award and that Sammy Sosa finally can hit 71 home runs. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. In the tradition of the ARCO Forum, we will now open the floor to questions from our audience. There are microphones placed at the left and right here for questions. Now, I will appeal to those of you who are standing at the microphone to please ask questions. I'm told that we are not expecting any talks or lectures. We want to take full advantage of the President's presence. So, questions, I'll take the first question of the gentleman at this microphone, and I'll ask the President to come back, if he would, to the microphone.
Good afternoon. My name is Patrick Sylvain. I'm a graduate from the Ed School and also from Haiti, your neighbor. I have to first congratulate you for the democratic movement you have installed in the Dominican Republic, unlike my country. But at the same time, I have two questions for you. One, what are you going to do with the conditions of the Haitians still living in the Batey, the sugarcane workers still living as fully modern-day slaves in the Dominican Republic? And the second question, given the fact that Haiti is very unstable and will be unstable with the elections coming up in the year 2001, if there is a civil war, and I gather that there are some troops, Dominican troops, amassed in the border, what will be the role of the Dominican Republic if there is a civil war in Haiti? Thank you.
Well, relating to the first question, as I said, right now in the Dominican Republic, we're in the midst of a capitalization process within the sugar mill state-owned companies. This means that the private sector will make huge investments in order to restore the production capacity of the sugar mills. And the Haitians living at the Bateyes will improve their social conditions because of the investments that will be made in all of these areas. Nevertheless, besides this, there has been major improvements in the living conditions in the Bateyes in the last few years. And there has not been any allegation, at least during my administration, of mistreatment of the Haitian cane cutters in the Dominican Republic. So I think we have made already some improvement in the human conditions of the Haitians cane cutters in the Dominican Republic. And I know that the situation will be even more improved with the participation of the private sector in the new process. Relating your second question, well, it's an hypothesis that you bring up to the point, and it is very difficult for a politician to present results on a hypothetical situation. In the year 2001, I will not be the president, so I will not be making decisions. That's the good part for me. But I don't foresee any situation of this nature taking place in Haiti. I know that there is a political instability basically as a consequence of the split that took place within the Lavalas family and the differences between President Aristide and Gerard Pierre-Charles, the different political groups that are participating there. But I think elections will take place. The whole international community will be monitoring the electoral process in Haiti. And I don't see, after the Chile resolution in 1991, that an undemocratic government can take place in Latin America anymore. It will not be recognized by the international community. So all the political forces in Haiti will have to make a commitment and somehow sustain the advancements of democracy in Haiti.
Thank you. Mr. President, there's a question at this microphone, and we'll come to that one next. May we have your question, please?
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Alejandra Lopez. I'm from Puerto Rico. I'm a freshman at the Harvard College. Both presently and historically, Puerto Rico and the Dominican Republic have had very close ties. I was wondering, what kind of relationship do you anticipate our two countries will have in the 21st century?
Well, we have had, as you said, very close relations through the years, and right now we're very tight relations. The governor of Puerto Rico has visited the Dominican Republic at least 3 times during my administration, and I have done the same thing. There are large Puerto Rican investments in the Dominican Republic, especially in the free trade zone areas. A lot of tourists from Puerto Rico to the Dominican Republic, and there's an increasing cultural exchange between the two countries. So in the future, what I see is closing ties even more. Puerto Rico integrating itself more with the rest of the Caribbean. So I see the best of relationship between the two countries in the 21st century.
Thank you.
Thank you. There's a question from this gentleman right here.
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Adam Taylor. I'm an MPP 1. Before arriving at the Kennedy School this past August, I traveled to Santo Domingo on behalf of the city of New York in order to try to strengthen a city-to-city relationship between New York City and the Dominican Republic, and particularly Santo Domingo. And my question is, particularly in light of a lot of interest in New York to strengthen ties between Dominicans in New York City and Dominicans in the Dominican Republic and Santo Domingo, what efforts or strategies have you employed or thinking about pursuing from the federal government side in order to strengthen that relationship, particularly in light of so many immigrants? I think it's an estimated 20,000 each year that arrive in New York City.
You mean the linkage between the Dominican community in the States
That's right.
and the Dominican Republic?
Exactly.
Well, this is something of major concern to us, and I've been very interested in trying to establish some sort of institutional linkage between the Dominican community and the Dominican Republic. There are nearly about 1 million Dominicans living in the States, most of them in the New York City area, and they maintain close relationship with their families back home. I can even say that one of the major sources for economic growth in the Dominican Republic has to do with the remittances they send to their families back home, which is nearly $2 billion a year. So this means that they really have a close tie with their families back home. The thing is creating opportunities back in the Dominican Republic. And what we're thinking is going a step forward within the free trade zone economic model. Instead of apparel and textiles, instead of having only what we might call a labor-intensive free trade zone model, having a capital-intensive complementary to the other, which will mean high-tech industry in the Dominican Republic. Since we have so many youngsters, Dominican youngsters in the States that have been trained in high-tech, this will be a major opportunity to go back to the Dominican Republic, do networking in the States, go back and forth, and somehow help the Dominican Republic and continue becoming attached to the United States. It's a way of taking advantage of the training that this workforce has had in a developed country like the United States. So I think that in the near future, if this project really develops, we will be able to attract all this young labor force trained in the U.S. back to the Dominican Republic.
Thank you. We have a question here from this gentleman. A question.
Mr. President, as a citizen of Haiti who share Hispaniola with you,
Yes.
we share together a triple heritage, the African one, the European one, and the Native American one. And to speak like Harvard people with the quantitative terminology, there is a common denominator. This common denominator for this triple heritage is hospitality. So we tell you, welcome, Mr. President.
Thank you.
And my question is, since we have that heritage in common, do you see in the future the possibility for better relation between the two parts of the island and even going toward integration?
In the Dominican Republic, we say that Haiti and our country have been united by geography and separated by history. And this has to do with the case that the Dominican Republic obtained its independence not from any European colonial power, but from Haiti. That was in 1844. And after the Dominican independence, in order to consolidate it, there was a 17-year war between the two countries. So there is a biased perception between the two nations about each other. And this was deepened by Trujillo, as you all know. The 1937 massacre ordered by Trujillo also was created a great distance between the two nations. So history has separated us, and there has been a distance. And I think President Prevails and I have made great efforts to improve the relationship between the two countries. And I think we have been successful in that. Never before, as now, have the relationships between the Dominican Republic and Haiti have been so good as they are now. But it has to do with also a personal relationship between the presidents. We hope that in the future, this can be institutionalized. Now, integration is more difficult, it's different. There is an integrational process going through in the region, in Central America and in the Caribbean. And the Dominican Republic is promoting a strategic alliance between Central America and the Caribbean countries for trade reasons, for investments, for training, but political integration, for me, is almost impossible. Why? Because political integration would mean renouncing sovereignty. And I don't think any nation would consider renunciation to sovereignty, to state sovereignty. So we do care for the destiny of Haiti. We do share your same concerns. And we wish the best for Haiti. We even advocate internationally for the better results for Haiti. But the Dominican Republic has its own problems. It has its own ideas, its own way of doing things, and as in Haiti, a nationalistic pride. So this intangible, subjective element of nationalistic pride on both sides of the island would make it impossible for an integration.
There's a question from this microphone that we'll move to. Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Daniel Gingrich. I'm a first-year graduate student in the government department. As many of you may know, Fidel Castro went on a goodwill tour of many Caribbean islands in the recent past. One of the islands he visited was Hispaniola, and specifically he visited the Dominican Republic. During this visit, he sat down with Joaquin Balaguer, and they seemed to have a rapprochement. And I'm interested in how you explain this rapprochement, given the long-seated antipathy that Fidel Castro held for the Trujillo regime and his even attempts, specifically in 1947, to engage in activities that would have overthrown this regime, and the fact that Joaquin Balaguer was one of the leading intellectual apologists for Trujillo.
Well, there's no doubt that radical political differences remain between two political figures like Fidel Castro and Joaquin Balaguer. But I think they have mutual respect for each other in terms of both being important Latin American leaders, both being highly intellectual. And I think there's a mutual personal respect, which doesn't mean that they share the same political views, which is something else. So this encounter between Balaguer and Fidel Castro doesn't mean necessarily that they share now the same ideas, which I don't think so, obviously.
Next question, please.
Hi, Tony Spanakos. I'm writing my dissertation on citizenship in the Dominican Republic and Brazil with Howard Riarda, actually.
Oh, really?
And my question was, it's long been documented in the past there have been many issues with Haitians, but a lot of times it's been ignored, racial discrimination against Dominicans who are actual Dominican citizens and not Haitians. I was wondering what your government has done to handle racial discrimination, what you think has been successful and unsuccessful, and what you think that your successors may do in this area.
Well, in the Dominican Republic, we have never considered that there has ever been a racial discrimination problem. And there's one reason. We are a mixed people. We are basically, as in Brazil, what we call mulattos. It's a mixture of black Africans and white Europeans, which makes a mixture of my type. We call mulattos. The majority of Dominicans are a mixture. So we have never experienced a racial discrimination in the Dominican Republic. We have experienced social inequalities, which is something else. You can be white or black or mulatto, and if you are from an under social class, then you can be rejected at certain points, but not on racial basis. It has been the Dominican society's division has basically been on social problems, not on racial problems, not on racial issues, I should rather say. You don't seem to agree.
No.
All right, I'll give you another shot. Okay, you want to make a point? Yes.
Just to be brief, historically, if you take Trujillo, Trujillo used to use powder makeup to make himself look whiter when he'd give speeches. It seems that quite often, especially during the Balaguer regime, people who were perceived to be Haitian citizens would be rounded up and sent out of the country. And this included often people who were Dominican citizens who didn't have papers with them or whose papers were ignored. This seems like it does affect certain Dominicans, and it's hard to deny that there is a racial element to discrimination when the overwhelming majority of the people who are on the poorest end of the scale are the darkest members of society.
You bring a point which is true, but we have to clarify. Within Dominicans, within Dominican citizens, there is no racial discrimination. Now, as I said before, there is a biased perception, Haitians towards Dominicans and Dominicans towards Haitians. This is mutually. And some Dominicans have a negative attitude towards Haitians, but not toward color, which is something different. You won't see racial discrimination among Dominicans. You might hear now and then an expression, but there is really no racial discrimination. There has never been in Dominican history racial discrimination as such. Now, there is rejection for historical reasons on Haiti, as I have seen Haitians also reject Dominicans, saying, well, any Dominican will never be in favor of social change or economic change in Haiti. I have heard the expressions. But it has to do with the way we have looked at ourselves in the past. Now, there is a new generation that is willing and struggling to change these ideas that we have about each other. So I'm sorry, I can't agree with you that there has been ever a racial discrimination as such in the Dominican Republic. I have never felt it. I have never seen it. I have felt it in the United States at some point. Here I have. When I was a student in New York, I'm sorry to bring this up. I don't want to make a problem out of this. But here in the United States, when I was a student in New York, at some point or another, I would feel rejected for racial reasons. Never in the Dominican Republic, or have I seen that in the Dominican Republic. And it's impossible because we say in the Dominican Republic, all of us have the black behind our ears. This is what we say, right?
You have a question, yes?
Mr. President, my name is Kara Hess, and I'm a mid-career student here at the Kennedy School. I was also a part of the joint Carter Center and National Democratic Institute delegation that monitored the polls in the Dominican Republic in 1996. First of all, I'd like to commend you for the progress that you've made thus far in terms of your democratization. My question has to do with the democratization of your country, and more specifically, the role of the legislative branch. What we've found in many countries that have had free and fair elections is that very few resources have been provided to the legislative branch to enable them to do their jobs. So there's very few or very little checks and balances between the two branches. So the executive branch winds up playing a very dominant role. And I'm just curious, how would you characterize the role of your legislative branch, your Congress, and have they been able to play an active and meaningful role in the national debate in terms of your development?
Well, one of the characteristics of my administration is that when we took office, we were in minority in both branches, in both chambers of the legislative, in the Senate and in the House of Chambers. One senator out of 30 and 12 deputies out of 149. So we were underrepresented, and this created a challenge. How can we pass the reform with an oppositionist Congress? And of course, I would say this has been one of the major problems we have had. the Dominican Republic has an interesting characteristic. I presented the statistics about economic growth, but it's interesting that we have experienced economic growth without reform, with the trade reform and the others. And why? Because we have not been able to create a consensus between the executive branch and Congress. And it is interesting that you bring up the question, even scholarly, in the academic field, it will be interesting, because I feel everywhere that you focus, in the academic world, the focus is we have to reform Congress in Latin America to make it a balance, to create checks and balances towards the executive branch. And I understand the reason. The reason is that in Latin America, tradition has been authoritarian regimes. So you have had strong presidents. You have had strong men leading the way. But when there is a transition from authoritarian regimes to democratic regimes, and you have free press, and you have civil society organizing, and you have the media playing an active role in criticizing the executive branch's role, the Congress, in the hands of the opposition, if they are not responsible, if they're not mature, if they're not really democratic actors, can become an obstructionist element in the democratic process. So my suggestion from my experience would be, yes, I believe reforming the legislative branch, but not weakening the presidency. In an authoritarian regime, I would understand that. But a democratic president in an underdeveloped country must have certain powers that will enable him to solve people's needs. In a country like Latin America, the Dominican Republic, the only personalized branch of power is the executive branch. And people tend to see the president as the only person that can solve my problem. So the president not only works on a macro view, he also has like a micromanagement. He solves individual problems and communities' problems. But if he has been undermined by other branches of power, he cannot deliver. And his image will deteriorate, and the credibility of the system will also collapse. So from my experience, I would say, yes, I understand the need to reform the legislative branch, but in a transition to a democratic regime or consolidating the democratic regime, I think what we have to think about is how can we modernize the presidency, making a modern presidency.
With the President's permission, we have time for a few more questions, just a couple more. This gentleman right here.
Hello, Mr. President. My name is Marco Herrera, and I am a Dominican Republic citizen. My question has to do very much with the legislative branch also. Instead of reforming it, in order to development continue in the Dominican Republic after the end of your presidential term, an adequate legal framework has to be established. Right now, there are a major package of laws standing in Congress that would be in accordance with the development that the Dominican Republic is right now experimenting. What are your plans on working with Congress before the end of your term so that some of those legal frameworks can be established before the end of your presidency?
Well, I've been working with Congress since the first day, but I have not been successful. And the reason is this. The political parties are very influential in everything. In the United States, for example, you can have a senator or a member of the House that can vote not necessarily according to his party's guidelines, because he has a personal direct responsibility to his constituents. In the Dominican Republic, as in the rest of Latin America, you vote as a group because your responsibility, more than to the constituents, is to the party. So if the party traces a line, the party says this is what should be approved or not, no matter what you deal as president with the congressional leaders, it is the oppositionist party that already made the decision. So in that way, it is very difficult. That is very difficult.
Okay, the gentleman here at the microphone.
Yes, hello. My name is Joaquin Abreu. I'm actually also from the Dominican Republic. I'm a student at the Harvard Business School. It's a pleasure to have you here. I have two questions. First of all, what would be the, would you say would be the top three initiatives by your government to spur economic activity in the Dominican Republic? The second question is, what type of incentive structures do you have in place in order to promote foreign investment in the Dominican Republic?
Well, on the first question, as I said, when we came to office in 1996, we had a reform package that has never been approved in Congress. So we have had, ironically, economic growth without reform, which is something very unique in Latin America nowadays. But we began reforms in the Dominican Republic, tax reforms and labor reforms in 1991. So we have benefited from the reforms that were first put in place beginning the decade, beginning the 90s. The next step forward would be, as I said before, going from an intensive labor free trade zone model to a capital-intensive or knowledge-based economy with the high-tech industrial parks. I think that is the next model or the next step in engineering economic growth in the Dominican Republic in the years to come.
I think one last question. Is this lady at the microphone? She's been standing for some time. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Esther Adames, and I am Dominican too. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you.
As the first Dominican principal in Boston, I want to ask, I have the privilege of asking you this question is, my concern is with students that will be migrating to the United States, and once they're petitioned for, many of them, to stop schooling, I was wondering if there's any effort, any campaign, or anything that can be done from the government's end to educate the parents and the students so that when they come here, they do not lose that, because I know that there is a solid education program in Dominican Republic. I'm a result of it. And many people who have gone through the schooling, if they do the proper schooling when they come here, you can transition easily. But if they're out of school, it's very difficult for them to come and then come into the egress. And right now, with the MCAS and all that's being expected from students, I'm very concerned that our students get a fair chance when they come into the United States.
I think maybe that can be improved in the years to come with the bilingual programs we're having in Dominican schools now, in private and public schools. I think we are all very much aware and concerned that in this globalized world, you need to have a good command of the English language. You can be very fluent in Spanish or in French, thinking about Haiti, but you need to train youngsters and people in school to learn the English language. When you navigate in the internet, it's in English. When you do networking, it's in English. So I think if we can really put forward a bilingual program, Spanish-English, when they come into the United States, they will not feel the cultural shock you feel when coming from an underdeveloped country to a developed country. The other thing is that if we continue improving our economy, people will not migrate to the U.S. seeking for a job. They will also do it for other reasons. Now, if they come looking for a job, most likely they will drop school and go to work. So these two basic ideas, improving schools and bilingual programs and improving the economy, then those who migrate will fit in perfectly within the U.S. school system.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We run. Would you like to take another? Thank you, Mr. President.
Gracias, Presidente. I'm from El Salvador, and I'm the proud husband of a Dominican, my Dominican
Great.
wife.
See, that's what we call integration.
That's true. The question that I have for you, Mr. President, is you've done an excellent job in the Dominican Republic, and you know, as an observer from outside, and not just from my Dominican family in the Dominican Republic, but you're what we would say a young guy still, and you know
Thank
your
you,
term
thank you. I
expires
appreciate
soon.
that.
What are your plans
What are
afterwards?
my plans after the presidency?
Yes.
Well, I have to stay active in Dominican politics within my party, the Dominican Liberation Party. There's a book I wrote some years ago about U.S. foreign policy towards the Caribbean. I will try to take it over again for a new edition. I would like to work on that, perhaps a year after I end my presidency, and be involved in Latin American affairs and Dominican politics, because I've made a commitment to that in my life. So I just cannot abandon that. I have to keep on.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
On that note, may we thank Again, thank you all for joining us, and we are most grateful to His Excellency President Leonel Fernandez Reina. Thank you again.
Digo,